Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience while we got started, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for the Climate Resilience and Urban Opportunity Initiative webinar on the guidelines and expectations for the planning phase. I'm Shamar Bibbins, Program Officer for the Climate Resilience and Urban Opportunity Initiative, and I will lead the webinar today. I'm joined by Lois Abaca, our Managing Director for the Environment Program, who will be on hand to help answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So as the grantee convening that we hosted in January in Berkeley, and in follow-up to the convening, we heard from many of you express the need for further dialogue around the planning phase. And in response to your feedback, the purpose of today's webinar is to provide additional detail to help inform your planning process and to provide an opportunity to answer any clarifying questions you may have. We've allocated 1 hour and 15 minutes for the webinar. Our comments would take about 20 minutes, and we will use the balance of the time for questions. And during the presentation, I will review the goals and expected outcomes of the initiative, present a model strategic roadmap, which represents some of our further thinking on the planning process, review the guiding principles that your plans should address, and provide some additional guidance around the nuts and bolts of creating your plans, including reviewing key dates that we hope will help inform your work over the next several months. Because of the number of participants, we have muted the webinar, and we ask that you type your questions into the question box that appears on your screen. And we will answer as many of your questions at the end as possible. However, feel free to type in your questions as they arise. Following the webinar, we will post the PowerPoint slides and a recorded version of the webinar on Kresge's website for your future reference. So as you know, the Climate Resilience and Urban Opportunity Initiative's overall purpose is to strengthen the capacity of community-based nonprofit organizations to influence local and regional climate resilience planning, policy development, and implementation to better reflect the priorities and needs of low-income people in U.S. cities. The planning grant support that you have received from Kresge is designed to help you strengthen your organization's capacity to substantially influence local and regional climate resilience efforts relevant to the communities you serve. Our hope is that this strengthened capacity will lead to the development of more effective climate resilience measures in multiple venues and will translate into tangible policy gains and investments that will address climate change with outcomes that are equitable for and reflect the priorities of low-income people and cities across the country. As we've outlined in the primer document, which is the document we published at the launch of the initiative, and that was shared at the January convening, our goal is strengthening the capacity of nonprofit organizations to engage in climate resilience efforts so as to advance several ends. Those ends include addressing the disproportionate impact of climate change in low-income communities, pursuing climate resilience measures in a manner that deliver multiple benefits to low-income people and communities, benefits such as jobs and economic opportunity, improved health and safety conditions, new community amenities, and meaningful civic engagement. Substantially influencing public sector-led efforts to address climate change so that the outcome of such efforts are equitable for and reflect the priorities of low-income communities. Expanding the number of thought leaders who approach climate resilience work with a strong analysis around social equity, generating model approaches and methodologies for the climate resilience field of practice, thus enhancing the effectiveness of climate resilience efforts overall. With these overall goals in mind, we develop what we call our North Star guiding question to help focus and guide our thinking and your thinking around the initiative. What will it take to ensure that climate resilience strategies in my region are truly reflective of and meet the needs and interests of low-income communities? As you may recall, we presented this question to you on the first day of the Berkeley convening in the pre-session meeting. It was very informative to hear your conversations and reflections on this question. Since the convening, we've thought carefully about your feedback and the overall planning phase. So over the next several slides, I will present a visual that we recently learned about and that we thought was very helpful in explaining the different components of the planning phase, and hope that you will find it useful as you work to develop your plans over the next several months. So don't be alarmed. The roadmap is blank. There is a roadmap, so I don't want you to think this is a typo. As we'll fill this in as we go. But as we discussed at the convening, your implementation plans should set a clear pathway for how you will shape and influence local and regional climate resilience planning, policy development, and implementation over the next 3 years to better reflect the priorities and needs of low-income people in your community. The plan should describe the steps your organization or coalition will undertake to become an influential or even more influential actor in your city and region on climate resilience. Your plan should address how you will work with an array of stakeholders over a period of 3 years to address 5 key elements we've discussed before. So as you will see on this slide indicates those elements that your plan should address. Your plan should explain how you will identify your community's assets and vulnerabilities with respect to climate change, or if such an assessment has been conducted, your plan should review and refine that assessment using a lens of low-income inclusion and benefit. Your plan should describe steps you will take to contribute meaningfully to specific public sector-led efforts to address climate change. Your plan should clearly define how you plan to engage community members in the identification and implementation of policies and other measures to improve the community's climate resilience. It should include strategies to pursue your climate resilience work in a manner that would deliver multiple benefits for local residents, and describe how you plan to document lessons, both positive and negative, to foster shared learning with others. We will be looking for these 5 elements to be addressed when we do the implementation plan. On this slide, I would like to distinguish between capacity and policy goals, both of which should be addressed in your plan. Essentially, your capacity goals should describe the skills, competencies, and conditions you need to develop within your organization and community to advance climate resilient policy goals. The purpose of addressing the capacity goals is to increase access to key decision makers and overall effectiveness and power to advance climate resilient strategies that positively impact low-income people in your region. Your policy goals should clearly identify the policy and programmatic changes you will target to drive comprehensive climate resilience, including the public-led processes to be influenced, specific changes needed, and equity opportunities to advance. I should note that we are describing policy goals broadly to include regulatory, funding, including budgetary and legislative policies. It is also important to note that we cannot be prescriptive, nor do we want to be prescriptive about what your capacity goals or your policy goals should be. Rather, we ask that you think about what makes most sense to your region and community, and to build your goals and strategies based on what you think is most realistic based on your organization or coalition and the environment in which you are working. While many of you will have several public-led efforts to influence, we recognize that some of you will be working to drive a standalone intervention that seeks a shift in a big structural change to a built environment. However, any standalone intervention would need to be tied to a larger policy, regulatory, or funding shift that have multiple impacts benefiting low-income people. So this takes us to the pink box on the right side of the screen, which is impact. Once you have identified your capacity goals, those changes that would help make your organization or coalition more effective for influence, and you have identified the policy goals that your organization or coalition seek to influence, the impact is the end towards which your efforts are directed. That is the implementation of actions to advance more climate resilience policies that deliver multiple benefits to local residents that are equitable and reflect the priorities of low-income communities. The final two components we would want your plans to address are the strategies and the description of the environment in which you are working and how you plan tracking changes in your environment, which are reflected in the blue and gray boxes. So in the blue box, we expect your plan to represent the specific strategies your organization or coalition would take to achieve the capacity and policy goals that you have identified as important that will lead to your desired impact. Again, this is an area where we can't be prescriptive because your respective strategies will look different based on your organization, your community, and your goals. The gray box, the environment and adaptive capacity, this refers to your plan describing the current environment in which you are working and how you imagine tracking shifts in that environment and adjusting your strategies accordingly. So based on what you know about the current complexities in your environment, politically, economically, environmentally, or otherwise, your plan should describe how you will build in adjustments to your work as necessary based on new opportunities that arise or perhaps doors that close. So I hope this model is useful to you in thinking about the different components of your work. We hope that you view the planning process not simply as gearing up for a new project, but rather as an opportunity to shift how you are thinking about your current work in a way that strengthens your institutional capacity to advance a comprehensive climate resilience agenda that reflects the priorities and needs of low-income people in your community. So now I would like to transition and review the guiding principles. So all of the principles are embedded in the primer document and were discussed at the convening and we're outlining the strategic roadmap. However, I would like to reiterate and review them quickly because they are vital to how we see the work and should be represented in your plan. As you know, Kresge employs a comprehensive definition of climate resilience. This definition is central to this initiative. Our approach incorporates preparing for the effects of climate change, adaptation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions mitigation, and fostering social cohesion. Through this planning process, we hope that you build your capacity to think holistically about how climate change will affect your community, how your community's decisions on issues such as infrastructure or land use affect its greenhouse gas emissions, and how the interconnectedness between people and institutions in your community contribute to resilience. So work grounded in climate science data. We do not seek a highly technical data analysis. However, we expect that your plans will reference and be grounded in an understanding of the effects that climate change will have on your community and region, an understanding of the climate mitigation interventions that hold the greatest promise for greenhouse gas reduction, and an understanding of your community's strengths and weaknesses from a social cohesion standpoint. It's also important that your plan is focused on interventions that will have a material impact to your community, have a material impact on your community and your region's climate resilience. By material impact, we mean strategies that are rooted in an understanding and the significant vulnerabilities of the drivers of and impacts that climate change will introduce, and that seek to achieve meaningful protection to multiple stakeholders and communities in your region. The use of cross-sector collaboration is also important. We think that the complexity and urgency of climate change and climate resilience demand that we tap the expertise of people across sectors and disciplines. As we review the implementation plans, We'll be interested to see how you anticipate working with individuals and organizations in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors to define and advance climate resilience measures important to your community. The importance of adaptive capabilities. We will be looking to see how your plan anticipates you learning as you go so that you can both adapt your strategy in real time as needed and document your emerging insights to share with Kresge and your peers working in other communities. So in review, I'll review quickly on what will make a compelling implementation plan. So to review, a compelling plan will reflect a clear understanding of the environment in which you are working. It will include the 5 elements mentioned in the strategic roadmap. It will clearly identify capacity goals your organization or coalition seeks to build that are necessary for implementation efforts. It will clearly identify policy goals and public-led processes your organization or coalition seeks to influence. It will describe strategies that engage multiple venues to build your community's comprehensive climate resilience while delivering multiple benefits to local residents. It will have adaptive capabilities, and it will address Kresge's guiding principles. So now I'll review quickly some additional guidance that we hope will be helpful as you think about your plans. So we encourage you to and defer to you to write your plans as it makes sense to you. Your narrative may include appendices or other supporting material that you feel will be important to describe your plans. We ask that your plans be no more than 20 pages, excluding any appendices or supporting material, with a font no longer than 11 points. We ask that your plans include an executive summary that is of no more than 250 words. I would like to note that your plans will be reviewed based on your respective community and region and will not be weighed against other organizations in the cohort. And we also recognize that the scope of each of your work plans will look very different given the size of your organization, the political environment in which you are working, and many other variables. And so with that in mind, the point that I just made about your plans being reviewed based on your respective community and region is very important just to keep in mind. So finally, I would like to review some key dates. So coming out of the convening and based on your feedback and interaction with the Kresge staff, we thought it was important to move the phone calls with Kresge staff up a month. So I would like to thank everyone for your flexibility in scheduling the calls, and I look forward to speaking with many of you in the coming weeks. In addition to shifting the phone calls, we would also like to make adjustments to the planned site visits. So as you know, we originally planned to conduct site visits in July and August, but because of the size of the cohort and given our own capacity, we would like to schedule site visits over the next several months, beginning in late April. So with that said, I encourage you to please think about if there are a particular time frame that would make more sense for your organization, and we can discuss the timing of the site visits further when we speak in the coming weeks. And then I would just like to draw your attention to the other key dates, which remain the same. July 1st, draft implementation plans are due. In September of this year, the subset of planning grantee recipients will be invited to submit proposals for multi-year implementation support. In October, the Kresge staff will recommend grant support. And in November, multi-year implementation grants will be awarded with a January 1st start grant period start for the implementation process. And so this concludes the end of our formal presentation, and we would now like to take your questions. So Lois and my other colleagues have been tracking questions that have come in so far, and we will take them as we can.
And this is Lois. So far, I don't see any questions. So fortunately, we have our fabulous IT person, Almir, here, so we can double check if you submitted questions and they're just not showing up. So hang on a minute, please. Okay, the questions are starting to roll in. Just a comment, thank you for whoever is saying this, saying that the chart was really helpful. We're glad to hear that. Font no larger than 11 point, do we mean no smaller than 11 point? Yes.
Yes. Sorry about that. Yes, no smaller than 11 point.
Can we access this presentation as a reference at a later date?
Yes, you can access the presentation. We will post it on the Kresge website. And you can access the recording as well.
Can we provide a copy of the PowerPoint as an attachment so we can share with our partners who are not able to join this webinar? Yes,
yes.
We're happy to do that. We're scrolling down to get to more of them. And then someone was saying, if we were not at the Kresge retreat, can we get the packet of information? Is it on the website, including notes? The primer is on the website for sure.
The primer is on the website. I would like to, so there is a site that we created specifically for the convening, and that is kresge.info. So it's just type in kresge.info, and it will pull up a place on our website that includes the agenda, the bios, and the participants at the convening. We also just recently added, so this is new for everyone because I have not sent an email out to let everyone know, but we have recently added materials, including some of the presentations and publications that we passed out at the convening. So please visit kresge.info for the materials from the convening, and that is also where we will house the PowerPoint slide. But yes, we will also send it out in the email attachment.
And then we have another question. Can you explain the concept of social cohesion in more detail? Who wants to take that?
Who wants to take that? So why don't you start?
Okay, I'll start on that. I mean, I think we don't have a really highly precise definition of it. I mean, generally we think about social cohesion as the quality of the connections that exist between people within a community and between people and institutions. And we included in our definition of climate resilience because we think of climate resilience as being more than just technical solutions, but really
works in your community to be influential and key to how we drive policy changes. So it's a part of using the networks, as Lois said, but we're also looking to learn from you in terms of how you see defining and building that for your communities and for the broader field.
Then we have another comment with a question. This has been extremely helpful. I think you said that we will not be compared across regions. But just to be clear, what if we are in the same region and operating in the same environment? I'll take a stab at that. I think that what we want to convey is that we've invited all of you to the table thus far, and what we want to be doing is evaluating the implementation plans that you put together relative to the geography in which you indicated you were likely to be working when you submitted your request for the planning grant, and that we understand that the grantees, that all of you, you represent kind of apples and oranges in terms of the type of organization and the geographic scope at which you're working, and so we don't want to be comparing you against one another so much as assessing you against the criteria that Shamar outlined of how well you understand the context in which you're working, the opportunities that exist there, the soundness of the strategies, all those things that were laid out in the PowerPoint. Another question, Shamar. Since the gathering in Berkeley, have you thought more about metrics for social cohesion?
That's a good question. We have, what I would say is we have, I wouldn't say we have not as collective, we have not in that respect in terms of something that we can report out on and share. However, I think one of the things that we're thinking about, we're continually thinking about is what's going to be most important to help you all be successful. And there are some particular tools, especially around the social cohesion tool that was presented at the convening that we've been getting a lot of feedback on that was particularly helpful. So we can perhaps think about how we find opportunities for more sharing around that and more learning specifically.
And one of the participants in the call has provided some helpful information, which is that the OECD defines social cohesion as a cohesive society works toward the well-being of all its members, fights exclusion and marginalization, creates a sense of belonging, promotes trust, and offers its members the opportunity of upward mobility.
Thank you.
Those are the only questions that we have now. Any other questions that you have for us? We have a comment. Thanks again for the chart and presentation. During the gathering, there was some indication that grantees would be interacting with both Kresge program staff and the evaluators. Can you explain further how these interactions are to play out and what are the expectations for the grantees? That's a great question. Do you want to take that or you want me to?
Sure. So it's a really great question. So we've been working very closely internally with the developmental evaluation team. You met Keely at the convening, and Julia Lynn has been another thought partner with us and been working very closely with us. As a matter of fact, the chart that you saw was introduced to us by Julia. And so we are planning to have continued internal dialogue. We're having a big meeting at the end of this month to really continue to think about how we continue to develop some of the internal learnings that we need to move forward with developmental evaluation and what that actually would look like in terms of touch points with all of you. And we just are still defining what that will actually look like. So I would expect at the end, after our big meeting at the end of this month, we will have a better idea of what the touch points may look like with all of you, and we would then communicate that out to you at that time.
And I would just add to that that at this point, it really was the feedback that you provided to Keely in Berkeley that helped us understand the need for us to give you better clarification about what our expectations were. And the chart that Shamar presented was something that another member of the development evaluation team brought to our attention as a way to explain it. So at this point, we're mostly using them to get feedback from you about where we need to be more clear. But as Shamar said, we're going to be figuring that out further, and we'll absolutely fill you in on how you might expect to be interacting with them in other ways. Any other questions? Hearing none.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, we thank you again for joining this afternoon. And expect follow-up. I will send an email with the PowerPoint slides to everyone who attended, and you can expect early in the week that the PowerPoint will be up on the website at Kresge.org. Kresge.info.
Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time on a Friday afternoon, and enjoy the rest of your day and weekend.
Yes, thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.